color is the pod. So for this it says green, big G, is the dominant color for pods of pea plants. Yellow, little g, is recessive. What are the phenotypes of the following genotypes? So again, when we are looking at this, let me zoom some more. Okay, so G, big G, equals green. Little g equals yellow. Okay, green is yellow, is dominant to yellow. So big G, okay, if we look at this code, big G means green. So that pod would be green. All right, the genotype here, big G, little g, we've got a big G, and so remember the big G beats up on the little guy, it's a bully, and so this one would code for green. And then we have two little g's, and so that would be yellow. Okay, now we're going to put these into the Punnett squares so that you can see them. All right, so here we go. This cross is the parents. One parent is big G, and one parent is big G, little g. So I'm going to put the parent in front on the side. So I put a big G and a big G. That's the one parent. We're going to stick it over here so they each have their own box. This one is, I'm going to put it on the top. So big G, little g. All right? So again, remember, they meet in the boxes, and our capital letters always go first. So we have big G, going down and over. So we have big G comes here, little g goes in here. Okay, then our next box, we bring this over, big G and big G. And then we take this one here, where these two meet, we have a big G and a little g. So I want to show you real quick, we're going to look at phenotypes. So my phenotype and the genotype. Okay, so geno and pheno. So the genotype of this offspring, okay, we have big G, big G, big G, big G. So we have two big G, big G's. And we have two big G, little g's. Okay? Now, by our standards, big G is going to code for what we talked about up here. Big G stands for green. Okay, so my phenotype for this offspring is going to be green. And then when I look at my other ones, this is a heterozygous. That means it's different. It's a hybrid. We have a big G that's in this pairing, and so that means it beats up the little guy, and so this phenotype would also be green. Okay? So that shows us that 4 out of 4 are going to be green, which is 100% probability that the pairing of these two plants is going to give you 100% green pods. Little g by big G, little g. So again, I'm going to take this parent, big G, little g, the other parent, big G, little g, and where they meet, I'm going to put them in the box. So big G, big G, little g, because I'm bringing this one over and this one down. This one's going to come down, and this one's going to come over. And remember, I keep my capitals first. So big G, little g. And then these two are going to go into this box. So little g, little g. So genotype, I have one big G, I have two big G, little g's. I have 1 little g, the phenotype for that. Big G codes for green. Big G, I've got these code for green because the big G in there beats up the little guy. And I've got 2 little G's, and we said little g codes for yellow. So this pea pod is going to be yellow. Okay, so let's look at percentages. So when I look at this, that means I have 1, 2, 3 out of 4 that will be green. And I have 1 out of 4 that's going to be yellow. Okay, so when we look at percentages, 3 divided by 4, we're going to get 75% are green. And 1 divided by 4 gives you 25% would be yellow of the offspring. All right, we got one last one. Hopefully you're feeling like you're a genetic genius by now. And you're like, Hudgens, I wish you would go faster. All right, so for this cross, we have a big G crossed with a little g. Okay, so I'm going to put the big G on the side and the little g on the top. Okay, so remember our arrows, where they meet in the box, that's what we do. So we've got a big G, then these come together, we've got big G. Then this one's going to go in where these two come in contact. We've got little g. Where these two come together, we have little g. So let's do our genome and phenotype. So genotype, what are the letters? Okay, I've got big G, I have 2 of those. And then I have 2 little g's. All right, so what is our phenotype? So the phenotype for this, big G, the big G beats up the little guy. So this is going to give me green. It codes for green pods. And 2 little g's, we said little g's code for yellow. Okay. Now, let's look at probability. So, 2 out of 4, because we have 2 big G, little g's, code for green. Okay. And that is 2 divided by 4 is 50%. Okay, and then we have 2 out of 4 will be yellow. And so that is also 50%. So in crossing a big G by a little g, we have 50% chance of getting green pods and 50% chance of having yellow pods. Okay, so it's a 50-50 shot. Now, I hope